Hi, everyone. My name is Xavier, and I'm really excited to do this mock presentation. I just wanted to give a little context as to why I'm not able to do a presentation in front of faculty or staff. So I support multiple schools, and the school that I'm doing an internship is not one of the schools I support, but it's my former school where I taught at and was an instructional coach at. So I figured that this would be one of the most productive ways to do so, given not only my busy schedule, but also the really strict schedules that schools hold for their own professional development. So I often do a lot of professional development through this platform called Zoom, and I share my screen, and I also do it in person. And because I'm going to use this platform Zoom, I'm going to be sharing my screen. And there will be certain pauses that won't make sense because they're meant to have participants in it, but just for context as I go through my presentation. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen. All right, so welcome to Understanding Interim and Formative Assessments. I'm super excited to dive in to understand a little bit more about what it takes for our students to feel successful and to experience success as they journey through high school. So without further ado, I wanted to share the agenda for today. There's 4 parts, and as you see, we're gonna dive into an icebreaker. From there, we'll dive into defining interim and formative assessments. That'll be a huge chunk of knowledge building portion. Once we close that out and building knowledge, then we'll take it to a self-assessment where you'll have the opportunity to reflect on the knowledge you just gained and apply it to your own context with your grade level team. And then we'll close out. If you have any questions. Great. So for our icebreaker for 3 minutes, how I'd like to open up is I'd like to connect our icebreakers to what we're going to learn for the day. And I'd like you to respond to the following statements with the true or false and discuss with another colleague. So 1, I felt most connected to a subject when I received good grades. 2, I knew what to do to improve when I did not do as well as I expected on the test. 3, tests do not define an individual's ability. So just mark true or false, and then discuss with your colleagues for 3 minutes. Great. So some of the things that I was hearing groups discuss was that they either felt very connected to a subject when they received good grades. I also heard that there was a lot of controversy with the third one, where tests do not define an individual's ability. Most of you said that it does not, and some did, because technically it does when it comes to skills. And I think the point of what this all makes me think of is that in order for students to succeed and to be able to understand their own abilities and experience success, they have to feel connected to a subject, and that comes through growth, right? So how do we get students to see their own growth, and how do we as teachers and as classroom practitioners understand how to get them there? And that's what we're going to learn today. So as we dive into defining interim and formative assessments, I do want to share the definitions of both formative and interim assessments. So for a formative assessment, it's a short assessment designed to gauge student learning during the lesson with the purpose of giving teachers insight into how to adjust instruction towards broader instructional goals. And then an interim assessment is used to evaluate a student's knowledge and skills of predetermined academic goals before end-of-year assessments. And it gives the district, the school, and teachers insight into what must be addressed prior to the end-of-year assessment. So now that we've shared both definitions, I do want to pose a very brief question. What would be the difference, in your own words, between a formative and an interim assessment based on these 2 definitions? Great. So something I'm hearing everyone say is that formative assessment is shorter, and while the other one's longer. A formative assessment seems to be just teacher-based and teacher-created, and it seems to be more within a teacher's control. It doesn't always have to be teacher-created, but it is within and used within the classroom, and only the classroom, not as a comparison point between teacher and teacher. While interim assessments do the exact opposite, they give insight into everyone's classroom across the school. So I appreciate hearing those connections. As we move forward, I find it helpful to show to share a visual of what type of assessments and the tiers of assessments that are available to teachers. So as you'll see, formative classroom assessments, those are the ones that we use to adjust our lessons minute by minute. They're integrated in the lesson. Those are at the bottom of this triangle, right? It seems like those also consume the bulk of assessments that we should be using as teachers. As you'll see, the frequency of administration is higher as you go lower, and the scope and duration of the cycle increases as you increase or as you move up the tiers of assessment. So for formative classroom assessments, they should be administered more often to understand where students are at. As we move to the second tier, right above formative, you have interim, right? And those again help districts, school staff, teachers understand where they're at in relation to others, and where students are landing. Therefore, again, the scope and duration of the cycle increases, and the administration of this is less than a formative assessment because their goalposts towards a larger assessment or a more in-depth assessment that's culminating of all content covered, which leads us to the third tier, the top one, which is summative assessment. And that is all encompassing of an EOC, it could be the FSA ELA, it could be, if you're non-accountable, meaning non-state tested, it is simply just a teacher-generated or a teacher-compiled exam that tests knowledge that was taught throughout the year. Regardless, all teachers should be using this, whether you're accountable, state tested, or not. I think that's like a huge point I want to make here. So I think, why is this important, right? Well, connecting this to our icebreaker, in order for students to feel as if they are successful in growing academically, it's important to build student confidence. And part of doing that is utilizing formative and interim assessments so that we can get them to those summative assessments where they really shine and they really understand the impact that they've made based off of all of the process that they underwent. So 2 points about this, right? Learning success starts at early ages where students interpret their own assessment results as an affirmation of success or fear of failure. And the second one being that formative assessments should not leave students wondering if they will succeed, but when. Again, so shifting the mindset away from that these assessments are indicative of a student's ability, and that defines who they are, and that it's something that they won't be able to revisit versus this is part of the process of your growth as a student. This is only telling us what we need to do next for you to get better. So let's dive a little bit deeper into formative assessments. So I wanted to break down what it would look like to provide a formative assessment. Something that's very crucial in formative assessments is that they have to scaffold to an overall benchmark or a standard. And an example that I want to provide you all is, let's say you are an ELA writing or reading teacher. You could even be a social studies teacher. It could be generally any content or subject that has a writing assignment. So the writing assignment is to read 3 novels by the same author, develop a thesis, and defend it in a term paper referring to the literature. A way to scaffold this prompt would be to first present an exemplar paper. Second, present a non-exemplar paper, analyze both individually, and then compare them once you've done the analyzing of both. Now that students have seen examples, they'll be able to draft a rough copy. From there, they'll take it to peer editing and get feedback from their peers. And should they need additional help, you'd be available. And then finally, this would lead to turning in the paper to be graded. And as you see, this wasn't a process of here's the prompt, turn in paper to be graded. And that is a shift I want to call, regardless if you're a state tested subject or not. It is important for these formative assessments that guide our daily actions to be able to be scaffolded and broken down for students so that they can see what parts they need in order to be successful. Some other components of effective formative assessments include having a clear purpose, what information will be collected, clear targets, deconstructed standards that are scaffolded for students on a daily basis and lead to mastery of the standard. The third is accurate assessment, meaning method scoring an appropriate amount of items to represent an intended target. And the last is effective communication, meaning time must be built into sharing results as descriptive as possible so students can improve. Taking it to Miami Senior High's context, and now for interim assessments. So now we've understood a little bit more about how to adjust instruction day by day and what that would consist of. I've emphasized this a couple times already, but non-state tested subjects do not have formal interim assessments, given that these are generally generated by the district and to hold the school accountable, whereas state tested subjects do. And as I said, they're given by the district and monitored by the school, and you're able to compare yourself across teachers to see like how students are doing and how you could possibly learn from someone else. So there are 4 different subjects that have interim assessments. All of U.S. history, so if you're a U.S. history teacher, math, meaning Algebra 1 and geometry, biology, and ELA, you will have some form of interim assessment. As you see, the former 3 are all topic exams, while ELA is a mid-year assessment. It's less frequent, whereas the other contents are more frequent, probably like biweekly or monthly, to really gauge progress. Another thing about interim assessments is that the purpose is to serve instructional purposes to help educators adjust and adapt instruction to better meet student needs. So it's supposed to be a goalpost, as I mentioned, not a smaller chunk within a unit, but this is supposed to be like, now that I've covered a good amount of content, now I know where I need to adjust my instructions moving forward. I'm meeting my students where they need to be so that they're even better for the next assessment. As I did with formative assessments, I wanted to share components of effective interim assessments. And the reason why, for those of you that are state tested and are probably thinking to yourselves, well, the district gives us ours, why is this relevant to me? Is because if you're a non-accountable subject, this is especially relevant to you. And if you are an accountable subject, meaning state tested, then it's important for you to be able to see what those exemplar qualities are of an interim assessment so that you could, 1, work in partnership with the school or the district so that if there are any gaps, you can help fill them. So these include not all multiple choice, provision for qualitative insights about understandings and misconceptions and not just a numeric score, immediate implications for what to do besides reteaching every missed item, rich representation of the content standards students are expected to master, high quality test items that are directly linked to the content standard specific teaching units, a good fit within the curriculum so that the test is an extension of learning rather than a timeout from learning, a good fit with curriculum pacing so that students are not tested on content not yet taught, clear reporting that provides actionable guidance on how to use the results, validation of the uses of and information provided by the assessment, administration features, meaning speed, availability of normative information, customization, timing, flexibility, adaptive, and these need to match the assessment purposes. And then finally, professional development for teachers as a result. of the interim assessment. As you see, there's a lot of components that make an effective interim assessment, and these are intended for you to not feel as if you need to hit every single one immediately, but strive towards as you continue to refine your craft. So now we built some knowledge, I want to take it to your own subject so that can be more applicable. I want to do a self-assessment. So I want you to form up in groups by subject and grade level, right? So if you're a world history teacher, you're naturally going to be a 9th grade cohort. If you're in biology, you're going to be a 10th grade cohort naturally. Geometry, same thing, naturally a 10th grade cohort. Same with ELA in 9th grade, you're going to be a cohort. ELA in 10th grade is going to be completely separate. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to create a T-chart of formative inter-assessments used by your subject. I want you to work with the teachers that teach the same subject, as I said. And the reason being is because I want this to be a collaborative task so that you push one another to see where are the gaps as a team that you're experiencing when it relates to formative or interim assessments, and then how I can assist moving forward. So we're going to take about 5 minutes to dive into that, and then we'll circle back. Great. So I'm seeing that everyone, for the most part, is done. And as I said, this is something that you will turn in as a soft copy so that we could collaborate on this moving forward. And where I'd like to move us to is to closing. So I want to appreciate everyone for engaging in the space. I am really appreciative for you all taking the steps to be vulnerable about where you are as practitioners when as it relates to interim and formative assessments. So what I want you to do as a closing is I want you to write one takeaway from this presentation, and I want you to write one commitment as a personal next step, and just email that to me. And that way I can help partner with you as we move forward. So thank you.